Hello and welcome back to the Lore Raider. From the rat ghoul plague of Star Wars to the flood infection of Halo, a staple of sci-fi universes is their plagues and diseases. And the Metroid Universe is no different. Even the most casual Metroid players will be familiar with the most prevalent and dangerous disease in the Metroid Universe, the Exo Parasites. And whilst we will be covering them, we will also be covering all known diseases, pestilences, and plagues in the Metroid Universe. Keep in mind, we will only be discussing biological plagues, not computer viruses like the Resbit virus or the corruption virus that plagues the Aurora units and Prime 3. Before we begin, my last video, the true power scaling of Bayonetta 3, got copyright flagged, and I'm fighting it, but it's really affected that video's growth. So if you are a fan of my power scaling, please check it out. The link to it will be down in the description below. I'd love to see you. The first disease on the list is an interesting one. Flesh-eating bacteria, specifically a flesh-eating bacteria that are carried by zoomers, a small, hard-shelled, insectoid-like species not to be confused with gamers. Zoomers, contrary to their popular belief, are not native to planet Zebes, or Talon 4, or even the Tetra Galaxy. They are a pest species that stow away aboard spaceships, and according to their log entry in Prime Hunters, the zoomers carried the flesh-eating bacteria and brought it to Zebes, where it wreaked complete havoc on the local environment. This would explain why, when comparing Metroid Zero Mission to Super Metroid, the environments are so different between the two games, as the disease ravaged certain species, allowing others to take their place. If you thought that was bad, meanwhile far away in the FS-176 star system, we can find a heavily blockaded and quarantined planet, Billium. Why is it so dangerous? Because the entire atmosphere is home to Miteralis, a sentient gaseous exterminator virus. Little is known about the virus itself, but what is known as the Exterminator Virus will exterminate all native life on Billium, and was most likely artificially produced and dropped onto Billium intentionally. While who was behind the creation of Miteralis remains a mystery, though I have my suspicions, but given the virus is indeed sentient, it is likely made up of billions of microscopic individuals that form its collective consciousness. Whatever the truth of Miteralis may be, let's hope this exterminator virus stays quarantined for good. The next disease on our list is Faison Fever, also known as Faison Sickness by the Galactic Federation and Faison Madness by the Space Pirates. It's a disease one can contract if they are exposed to Faison for extended periods of time. While the age and species of an individual, as well as the grade of the Faison said individual is exposed to, will affect the severity of the disease, Faison Fever, once contracted, almost always begins mutating the victim. Such mutations include an increase in mass, aggressive behaviors, heightened senses and reflexes, and the rotting of brain tissue, and finally, Faison Madness. Faison Madness, which results in further brain rot and incidentally results in increased pain tolerance. Faison Madness usually results in a condition similar to dementia. The victims of this condition were used as training dummies for the pirate elites. If your body attempts to reject the Faison Fever, things get even worse as your body tries to expel the Faison through methods such as vomiting, which we see from Samus in Prime 3. The rejection leading to Faison Madness, deformation, organ failure, and ultimately death. Finally, after an undetermined period of time, assuming the victim doesn't die before then, they will succumb to terminal corruption, having entirely lost their mind and free will and becoming controlled by Dark Samus. This fate befell the bounty hunters in Prime 3, and is what happens to Samus if she succumbs to the condition herself. Next on the list is Twin Fever, a condition caused by a virus located on the planet Twin Tabula, which is coincidentally also in the FS-176 star system, alongside its brother planet Billium and its Miteralis. Twin Fever causes a sort of double vision, also known as twin sight, and once the twin sight clears up, it is a sign that the infected person will soon perish. Luckily, unlike Billium, there's no evidence of any sort of effort to blockade the planet or quarantine the planet, suggesting the disease is manageable. So, good news for you spacefaring tourists. Thank you, Galactic Federation. The final disease on the list is, of course, the Exo Parasite Infection, a species native to SR388 that used to be the apex predators of the planet until the introduction of the Metroid species. They were also introduced to planet ZDR inadvertently by the Makan tribe of Chozo, as we see in Metroid Dread. Through both Metroid Fusion and Dread, we got a very good look at how the Exo infection works. Upon being infected, the victim almost immediately loses consciousness and dies. We know this as Samus herself lost consciousness and nearly crashed into an asteroid at the beginning of Fusion. From there, if the host is viable, the X will replicate the creature or change it to suit environmental pressures. Unworthy hosts, or hosts infected for long periods of time, are turned into zombies, gloopy, barely held together globs of goo that the X feed off of. Eventually, a normal host will be sucked dry, leaving behind a skeleton, as we saw with Ceres, and the X proceed to bud off and divide into new X, or if inhabiting a particularly strong host, turn into a core X and incubate more X inside of itself, all whilst asexually dividing into copies of itself, as we see in the case of there being over a dozen SCXs in the BSL station. Luckily for the galaxy at large, the SR388 strain is extinct after the end of Fusion, and the ZDR strain is implied to have survived past Dread, but we'll have to wait for Metroid 6 to see what happens. And there you have it, the diseases of the Metroid universe. Pretty disgusting and scary, right? Well, luckily for you and luckily for Samus, most of these diseases are well under control. Ignore the Exo Parasites. But I hope you enjoyed that video, I certainly did, and if you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe, and check out my other videos, notably that Bayonetta 3 video, which you'll find in the description and pinned comment down below, a link for it. Until then, be safe, be wise, and of course, please pray for a true peace in space.